I want to preface this entire video by saying I believe in fourth fingers. So many people have doubts about their fourth fingers and think they're flawed and come to me with all of these woes, when really everybody struggles with their fourth finger and it just takes some exploration. There is nothing wrong with your fourth finger. And my fourth finger is far from perfect. It is not always beautifully arched. It's not always the most comfortable. And yet it's gotten me through 30-ish years of violin playing and 2 degrees in violin performance and various competition and orchestral wins. So good enough can get you a long way. This video is chock full of information, so be sure to stick around to the very end and let's get into it. Let's briefly go over why we even use fourth fingers, because I get so much resistance about this. Like, do we even really need to use them? And I want to encourage a little mindset shift here, because fourth fingers are such a useful tool, and the more you play and the more you use them, the more you'll see how very useful they are. They help us avoid string crossings, which can be clunky and messy and cumbersome. They help us avoid open strings, which often have a very different timbre than the notes that we finger. So using fourth fingers in those situations just helps us create a more homogeneous sound across the instrument, and automatically, immediately makes you sound more mature. And a lot of times, they just make sense. It's right there for you to take it, instead of going to your open E string and creating a clunky mess by, having lots of string crossings. And this is especially true as things get fast. When you have fast passage work, fourth fingers are just such a great tool. So let's get into some of the very common problems that people face with their fourth fingers. The first is that your fourth finger just feels weak. And if your fourth finger feels weak, you gotta stop avoiding it. It needs exercise to build strength and consistency and reliability, just like anything else you do on the violin or in life. There are some great exercises you can try. You can do some left hand pizzicato just with your pinky finger, where you really pull the string, It is a great exercise also for just independence of fingers and to start building some of that nice independent strength in that finger. You can also use the Schradiak School of Violin techniques. Just make sure when you're doing exercises like these not to overdo it. If your hand or your fingers or your arm, your shoulder start to feel tired, give them a break. I have actually compiled a PDF with these exercises and with some of the best tips from this video in a PDF, which you can find in my description box below. And let's briefly talk about technique for a moment. When your fourth finger is not being used, we want to train it to be hovering just above the string with the rest of your fingers. We want to make sure that it's not kind of pulled back here ever, but that it's just hanging out like the other ones. When we use it, we want to drop the finger down like a hammer. We're going to talk about this a little more in a moment, but we want it to come down with speed so that it stops the string with a clear attack. And then when you release the finger, we want to release right above the string. We don't want it to pull back again into that hook that's very common. All this takes is a little presence of mind to get your finger lifting right above. So if your pinky finger feels weak, it's also very likely that it might sound kind of weak. Let's return to some of the technique stuff we were talking about a moment ago. When you drop your finger down, we want it to come down with a lot of clarity and speed. And I think it's easy to think here that you need a lot of force, and it's not so much force truly as it is speed. If your finger comes down kind of slowly, that's where we get a lot of fuzzy sound, because we haven't stopped the string with clarity and precision. So you can think of dropping your finger down like a hammer, with speed and with a lot of springy action. In fact, we call this finger action. Another very simple reason why you might not be getting a good sound on your pinky finger is that you've just forgotten about your bow a little bit. This is really normal. if we're very focused on left hand stuff, it's very easy for us to kind of lose sight of the right hand a little bit. So just make sure when you're practicing fourth fingers that you haven't lost sight of all of that great bow technique and bow knowledge that you have. It's just the basics, playing with a straight bow, maintaining good contact between the bow hair and the string as you're working on this left hand stuff. And lastly, if you have vibrato in your arsenal of tools, that is also a way to help make your fourth finger sound stronger and fuller. When students first start using their fourth fingers, one of the main problems is that they feel like they can't really reach far enough. So let's talk about that for a little bit. There is, in general, more flexibility and more reachability and more like overall possibility of movements in your left hand than you might think. So when we're talking about reaching high enough for fourth fingers, it's usually not just coming from your fourth finger alone. One of the main things we need to think about with reaching fourth fingers is to prepare for them. So whatever finger you're on before the fourth finger, you can think about reaching from that finger, using that finger as a point of leverage, as a jumping off point to find spaciousness here in your knuckles to be able to reach. And this is true no matter what finger you're coming from. A lot of getting to your fourth finger is just in the preparation. And I want to say here, before I even go on to the next set of suggestions, that tension here is really going to hinder your ability to reach. Anytime we're talking about flexibility and expansiveness in the body, we need softness, we need suppleness in order to find that spaciousness. So think about having a softness, a soft palm, soft knuckles in order to find more space. And then there are like all sorts of ways that you can make the distance you feel like you have to travel with your pinky finger feel smaller. Like there's so many ways, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to like think of all of them, or you might get bored if I if I list them all here. But like one thing is that we don't want your hand to be like back like this. We want your fingers really to be hovering right over the string, so they're almost like in a parallel line. Not quite, but we want to angle your hand that way so that they almost are. There's movability here with the ridge of your knuckles against the neck of the violin. So that's a way that you can make the distance smaller. When you reach from, there's spaciousness that can open up between your knuckles here. If you bring your wrist in a little bit, we don't want this, but just a little bit can help you reach farther than you might think. The placement of your thumb, I don't really use this, but I've heard this a lot, that the placement of your thumb can really affect the way that distance feels in your pinky finger. So there are really so many ways, if you start exploring, to minimize that distance that your fourth finger has to cover. I think I'll leave it at that, because otherwise I think this will turn into a very boring video. If your fourth finger buckles or kind of locks, this is a good one to talk about because it's also very common and it's uncomfortable. The way to deal with this is to prevent it. We just don't, once it's locked, it's like really hard to like snap it out of it. So if this is you, I would refer to all of the ideas that we just talked about minimizing the distance and making your fourth finger feel like it can reach further. The reason why your fourth finger buckles is that we haven't helped it properly reach the place that it needs to go with the proper support. And having an arched finger really is sort of better. Again, this is not to say that I always have an arched finger. I don't. But I think that is the goal. It is the goal to have a nice arched finger. And this is for all sorts of reasons. It gives you more agility. It just helps your pinky function better and move around with more ease. So it's been a little while since I originally made this video. My hair is shorter now, as you can see, and I just want to say I actually don't fully agree that a curved arched fourth finger is like always what we should be going for now. I just don't fully agree with that concept like I did when I was originally making the video, because context is very important, and curved and arched and rounded is great if you're like playing a lyrical passage and you want to be vibrating and you're holding the note for a long time. But there are definitely instances like
if you're having to reach for an extension, or maybe in some sort of fast passage where it's just not really possible to have a curved arched fourth finger. You might just have to reach for something and it ends up being kind of flat. So context is really important, and there are no hard and fast rules for anything.
So really the best method, I don't know if I can do it, but the best method to prevent your fourth finger from buckling is to decrease the distance that it has to reach. So refer to all of those tips from the last idea, which will help your finger maintain the arch. I heard someone else give this great tip recently about fourth fingers in high positions, and I'm just going to talk about this very briefly because I know not all of you guys are at this point yet in your playing. But if you're up high and you're having trouble, just wrap around more. Like, get it so that your fourth finger and your whole hand is really like on top and above, and you'll be amazed at actually how like free and supple you feel up there. It's not working hard, it's not pressing hard. You really don't have to press that much at all, actually. And it just like kind of works. So just wrap around and just get right up there. It's kind of amazing. My finger is actually not really on top of the string anymore. It's more on the side, and I promise it'll still work. All right, now here's the gold. The main problem with fourth fingers is that you don't believe in them. I just encounter this so much. You don't believe in them, and so it's like this self-fulfilling process, or prophecy, self-fulfilling prophecy. Here you are telling me you can't do it, and so you can't do it. And all your fourth fingers really need is a little belief in them that they can do it, and a little commitment on your part to give your fourth finger the strength and the energy that it needs to do well. And then it will. It really will. You can find the exercises I mentioned and some of the most important resounding ideas from today's video in a PDF that I made, which you can find in the description box below. So go check that out and share what resonated with you in the comments. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next time.